Okay, so for your second week learn together, I'm going to go over the first step and just give one video for that because I noticed I was doing too much, going too long. So, flowcharts, we've seen them already in this course, and you may have already seen them, but the first time we saw it was here in day 3 where she did the ticketing flowchart version. And flowcharts are just great to understand because it is a way of organizing our thoughts, right? And helping us step through writing code that achieves a certain outcome. So, it's always worth that basic what is a flowchart, search, right? So it's a diagram that represents a workflow or process. So, what I want you to do for this first item is first get a little more information on what goes into creating flowcharts. Again, based on your major and what classes you've taken, you may already have some experience with that. But one good thing to do is just look at images, and I saw it here a minute ago, so let me see if I can find it again. That just gave like the basic pieces, the symbols themselves of what that is. And actually, you could do this. You could also in here. Notice I'm in Google. I'm going to go to Flowchart Symbols, just so we can see an example. Here we go. Right. So we have um, decisions. We have processes that we do. We'll probably not deal with documents or any of this. Will deal with a little data storage. Definitely some input output, right? This is asking user for the input. We're definitely displaying. But if I just see the process, the decision, the beginning, the terminator, and I'll show you my example on this, but just spend a little time, right, getting to know what these are. And know that we're only going to use the basic ones. So what are you going to flowchart? Let's come back here, right? So for your next week's first development project, remember there are 3 of these. Your first one's coming up next week. And here's what you're going to need to do is come up with a concept for your Dev Zero coding project. And so you've been watching Dr. Angela at this point show you several approaches, learning to code, but she's coming up with these concepts and writing code and then us walking through it with her, right? So this is going to be your opportunity, right? And this is really important is that I know that there's and I have to say this because I want to start this off on a understanding. Like I know there's a lot of code out on the web, and the idea is not for you to go out and get that code and have that be your project. Trust me, it doesn't end up well. I've had a couple students through the years I've done this try it, and this doesn't work well, and it's not the point. The point of this is for you to come up with something that you want to write code to accomplish, right? And then you're going to write Python code that covers that uses write Python code that uses the concepts we've covered in day 1 through 7. And let me just give a little caveat here. For those of you that have more knowledge and beyond this, I still ask you to, stay within these concepts because sometimes it's just good to say, maybe you have a higher understanding of programming, but be able to stay within the concepts that we've learned. And then just to know that part of next week is that you're going to come in and do a code review with me, and I'll be talking more about that next week. So, just to give you a little sneak peek of this, because I spent a little time today rewriting my requirements for Dev Zero. And basically, what I'm saying is, I want you to use these type of commands in Python that we've learned and come up with a concept, right, that you want to write Python to create a desired output. And your output needs to be meaningful and represent your own ideas. Okay. You need to use variables. Now, this idea has not really been covered, so I'm actually going to introduce it in one of the next videos, but it's just basically where the variables live And you'll see this converting strings to ints and ints to strings. We've done a lot of this and already getting input, which is pretty much related, right? So when we get input, it comes in as a string. We often have to convert it if we want to use it in some numeric way. Flow control is not the term that has been used a lot here, but basically all of these structures for how we control the flow of our program. Functions, something, again, I'm going to do a little pre-learning this week with you, and then list and loop. So not that you have to, at this point, you may see this and go, what the heck, Rio, right? So here's what I want you to do. And this is why we're doing it. I want you to just think of, right? Spend a little time doing what I said, which is understanding flowcharts. Wouldn't hurt, right? To also look at some examples, right? Wouldn't hurt at all. I mean, we've seen some already in this course. Here's a good one. Very straightforward. Leave home, check time before 7 a.m. Nope. Take the bus. Yes. Take the subway. Reach school. So this is obviously not for code, but it gives you the idea of, right? And this is the thing, we all do this kind of decision making process every day. We just generally don't flowchart it. But when it comes to writing code, we want to give our thoughts more structure. And really, the reason I'm doing this here is to give you the experience to get you thinking about what you want to do for next week. Okay. All right. So here's your detail instruction. And let me just show it to you, and then I'll come back and make sure I cover everything. So I've already done the work, like I always talk about, and it's in your public, right? So you're creating a week 2 and then a dev 0. This is your first task here. And then I'm going to show you in a minute how to use some of the free flow charting software out there. You'll create your flow chart for your concept. But first, what you want to do is just create a readme.md. You've been doing this a while now. So as an example, like for me, I'm going to do tracking the cost of charging my EV. Right, asking for location and desired charging, and then based on their input, track the cost and frequency of the charging practices. And then what this does is if you use this command here, what will happen, and remember when you're looking at markdown files, if you come up to NVS Code or whatever editor you happen to be using, you can do what's called open preview. And what this does is actually output it as basically it's rendering it. Okay, so that's what you're going to do. All right, so now let me show you now. And now those will go in that folder, and then you'll give a link to it. But there's so many things. Matter of fact, let's start here because if you do free flowchart software, free flowchart online, and search just that general one, you'll get a ton of stuff out here. The idea is obviously free. I don't want you to pay for anything. The one that she uses, I found here, which is Flowchart Maker. And it's a pretty good one. Like you can save it to a particular drive. You're going to need it local, but you can do that. You can decide later. Here's all those symbols that we've learned something about a little bit by now, right? You can drag them out into here. You're totally welcome to use this. I like this because you don't have to set up an account. When you're done, you can just export it as a JPEG. So feel free to use that one or others that you see out there. But here's what I do is I typically just do because this is available for anybody that has a Gmail account, which I find to be a lot of people. If you go to drawings.google.com, okay, what you can do here is you can do that same thing. What I like about this is already in my Drive account. So like dev Rio flowchart, maybe something, you name it, whatever. I'm going to actually show you. I change the name when I finish. But in general, and most of this software is going to be the same in this respect, is you come over to shapes, right? You choose, in fact, let's actually choose, and notice like these should again start looking familiar, right? So here's your start, right? And then you can double click into here, put some text in here. You most likely one of the first things you'll do is get some user input, and at that point be making a decision based on that. So you could absolutely, right? Come over here and then put input output, or you could just put a decision, because at this point, where's that decision box? There it is, right? So if I come and click here, cool, right? And then what happens once, again, you can give it some text, right? You can connect it, which is, in this case, if you're making a decision, most likely it'll be maybe a yes or no, or if you're asking for input, like for mine, I'm asking a charging location. Notice there's these little grid lines to help you line things up. So, um, and then to connect everything, it's very simple. It's a little aggravating at times, but it works. Like I can do a line or I can do an arrow. Arrow makes more sense. So if I click and drag down, notice what happens. I can already see, and I'll come back to selector, boom, right, and just line that up. All right. So play around with this. Like I said, the most of the stuff you'd probably want to use for something like this. You don't have to get in depth. Is probably going to be here, but use whatever you want. I don't really care. Ultimately, when you're done, what you'll want to do is download it. And I tried MPEG, which is my preferred format, but because of the way Google does some things to it, it didn't really look good in the output, and probably because of this transparent background. So I just did JPEG. Okay. I'll show you mine. This was just my first take at my code that I'm going to write. Um, in this case, I start my program. I ask the user for a location. If they're at a supercharger, then I ask them how many miles they want to add in the battery. If I'm at home, there's some defaults set that way. Either way, you come down to calculate the cost. You store that, and this is what, again, you're learning, which is storing it in a list. Because the data that we're using for this first dev is not what we call persistent. This is only when you're running the program. Something we'll add functionality later to. And then I say enter more data, which in that case I did. We go back up to the start, we do it again. This is your while loop. And then, or view the report. So we drop down and view the report, or we end. So it's just a way to organize your thoughts, right? It's a way to give you some time to think about an important part of this class that's coming up, right? So this is the written instruction for what I just covered, to hopefully give you that overview of what you need to do. I showed you the output here. So what you want to do is in your reply for this specific item, once you push this, and notice how, by the way, I changed my name, because one thing you want to kind of get used to is using lower cases, no spaces in file names. It's just a general good practice. And then you can see the code, that a markdown code that I did to include this. Now, this is actually just the image view here. Remember how I showed you how to do this. If I get out of this, this is the markdown, and I go to the center one to do the preview. I believe there's also probably something over here to do it, but most of the time I just come here, go to this icon, and it gives me that. And that readme.md will be the first link you'll give in your reply. So play around with flowcharts. Okay. See how she's used them. Do a little research to help you if you've never done them. They're pretty logical, but it's always good to increase your knowledge of these kind of things. This one has been around for a while. There are other ones that maybe some might think we use something newer, but I think this is still a good way to help us organize our thoughts. And again, it's not that you have to, that you're not absolutely committed to this flowchart. It's just my way to give you some work related to a really important part of this class, and I want you to take advantage of that. Okay? All right. Hope this helps you.